The US and China are embroiled in a high-tech fight for dominance. But this war isn't fought with weapons. It's fought with trade, technology, and data. Semiconductors are the new front line. The US has introduced new laws to bolster its domestic industry. But is the legislation also a thinly veiled attempt at capping China's rise? Semiconductors, or chips, are the foundation of modern life. In fact, they're so important that America is in a full-scale chip war. During the pandemic, chips became harder to find. A spike in sales and supply chain issues led to product delays for consumers, and that exposed a real problem for America. The US realised it's not making anywhere near enough chips to maintain its global dominance. American firms are still leaders in designing the technology, but the Netherlands produces most of the critical machinery needed to make the chips, while Taiwan, South Korea, and increasingly China churn them out. If you're at all unsure how this affects you, take a look at what chips are used for.
Microchips are the basic building blocks of modern technology. They're the tiny electronic switches on a small flat piece of silicon that run all computations. The first silicon transistor was built in the US in 1947. And they're at the heart of devices we use to live, work, and travel. Like the smartphones in your pocket, cars, TVs, wind turbines, robots, the data centers powering the internet, and even military equipment. This year, the microchip industry is expected to reach $600 billion, and by delivering new functions and better performance, all at a lower cost, each new generation of microchip is transforming industry and the way we live our lives.
On August 9th, US President Joe Biden signed the so-called CHIPS and Science Act into law. The legislation is designed to bolster the US domestic chip manufacturing industry. It allocates over $54 billion worth of subsidies to build more chip plants in the US and to support local research and development. It also provides a 25% tax credit for building and equipping US chip plants. In short, the CHIP Act is a pathway for the US to become more self-sufficient and less reliant on overseas semiconductor development. The big incentives have some of the world's largest companies biting. Intel is one of them.
You know, the CHIPS Act, the way it's designed, it's up to $3 billion per project. Obviously, we have 2 projects here. You know, and you sort of say, well, why is that? And, you know, all the studies have shown that if we were building in Asia, you know, and remember that, you know, the US and Europe used to be 80% of manufacturing. Today, we're 20%. And this became acutely seen throughout COVID. It's like, why did we let something so important? Every aspect of your life is becoming digital. Everything digital is semiconductors, and now we've become acutely dependent on a few areas of the world, and some of those not the most geopolitically stable. So let's build them back here. But if there's a 30 to 40% gap in the cost of building it there, what we build here must be competitive in the world. And that's the nature of the CHIPS Act. It's about closing that competitive gap.
So on the domestic front, major development is underway. But that's just part of the US strategy. On October 7th, the Biden administration unveiled sweeping measures aimed at limiting China's ability to import advanced chips, including the sophisticated ones used in military technologies. It also cut off China's access to the equipment it would need to manufacture its own. The Biden administration took the action unilaterally, but is pressuring its allies to fall in behind it. However, some countries are reluctant. The Netherlands is a major chip maker, and the Dutch trade minister has said his country won't blindly follow the US. The Netherlands and Japan share many of the US's security concerns, But the two countries also see China as a major market they don't want to lose. Washington has also imposed unprecedented restrictions on US citizens and residents who work for Chinese semiconductor companies. And this could strike at the heart of the Chinese chip industry. Since the early 2000s, China's semiconductor firms have relied heavily on foreign talent. Under the US export controls, American citizens, green card holders and residents would require a government license if they want to work for China's semiconductor companies. And while most analysts say this move is a major setback for China's chip sector, Anne Hoker, a partner at Bain & Co., says it won't stop China in the long run.
There is one thing China has been very consistent about. They need to build up an indigenous source of semiconductors. They will continue to put a lot of money in it, and they will continue to progress.
Well, is this a new style of Cold War? Joining me now to break it all down from Washington, D.C. is Riley Walters. He's a Deputy Director at the Japan Chair Hudson Institute and a Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Global Taiwan Institute. We have Shirley Ziyu in New York, a political economist and professor focused on China's modern economy and techno-geopolitics. Completing our panel is Monique Chu from Southampton, a Chinese politics lecturer at the University of Southampton and author of the book The East Asian Computer Chip War. Thank you all so much for joining us here on The Newsmakers. Riley, kick us off, because there will be some people out there who perhaps aren't that into tech who could be forgiven for thinking that this really just doesn't affect them. Why are they wrong?